So this week I want to address something that, well, every portrait artist dreads, I think, and it's a poor reference photo. So you get an inquiry through about drawing my horse, cat, dog, whatever. You get really excited about it, and the photos come through, and you just think, oh gosh, do I say no? Do I kind of hope that I'll be able to deal with it when it comes around to drawing it? What do I do, basically? So this week I just want to talk to you about poor reference photos, and I've got a few different sort of ideas really that you can use, a few little tips really for you to be able to deal with your poor reference photos. Now, one of the biggest tips I can give you, actually, and sadly there is a cost, is using a photo enhancing software. I think this is something that, if you can afford it, every pet portrait artist needs some form of photo enhancing software. The particular software I use is the Topaz Gigapixel, and I also have the Topaz Sharpen and denoise, but the Gigapixel is the one that I use the most. And what happens with the Gigapixel is it takes a very poor small photo and it enlarges it, but it enhances the pixels rather than, I'm not going to get all technical about this because I can't really explain it technologically, but basically if you've got a very small picture and you make it bigger, all you're doing is you're making all of the elements bigger, so you're making the pixels big, just everything bigger, so you end up with a very, very fuzzy photo. With Topaz Gigapixel, what happens is as it increases the size of your picture, it enhances everything as well. So I've got some examples here. This is a really good example, actually, and a portrait that went down really, really well last year. I was sent this photo, which isn't, it's not a bad photo, but it's fuzzy. I wouldn't class this as a really bad photo, I have to say. But it is a little bit fuzzy, and it is a little bit, oh gosh, where are the sharp lines? I can't really see very much in the eye, all of that type of thing. So, and here's a close-up of that photo, so you can see it really is a little bit blurry. So what I've done is I've taken it through Gigapixel. I've enlarged it because it was particularly small. It was just I think it was just a screen grab, to be honest. I've taken it through Gigapixel, and you can see how it's enhanced all of the details, and it also increased the size of it for me so that when I was looking at it, I could blow it up, zoom in, and I could actually see some of those details. You can also see now actually how nice and detailed that eye is. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's enough, and it's good enough for me to be able to work from it and create a really lovely portrait. So that's why I think this Gigapixel, I don't know of any others, to be honest. I think Adobe Lightroom has its own enhancing bits in there. But for me, the Gigapixel has been a lifesaver, I have to say. And you can tell the difference of these two images. They're miles apart. And it just makes it so much easier as an artist to be able to see the details, to be able to draw them. If we go on to this next one here, so a lot of the time we're given very, very dark photos. Again, it's difficult for us to be able to see into the shadows. We don't, when it's really dark, we don't have to get all of those details in. But clearly with this piece here, we needed to get into there so we could see the eye, the shape of the eye, get into the sort of see what was going on in some of those shadows, and obviously the shape of the cheek as well. So with this one, I took it into Adobe Lightroom. So I have a subscription to Adobe. I get Photoshop and Lightroom together, and it costs something like €9 a month. For me, it's a no-brainer for my business. I use it all of the time, and it's so useful. It means that I can edit photographs that come from my clients. I can either look at the colouring or I can look at the exposure or something like that, and it makes a massive difference. So with this particular one, I looked at the exposure, and we took the exposure up, and then I ended up with a relatively nice photograph to work with, and then I'm not sort of, losing sleep thinking, oh gosh, how can I work with this horrible photo? You have editing tools on your phone as well. So if you have a smartphone, you're most likely to have an editing tool in there, again, where you can maybe sort of tweak the exposure. And there'll also probably be some free apps out there as well. So it's worth having a look at just to see what you can get that's going to help you to sort of better a photograph that you're sent. Hopefully you'll be sent a photograph that's absolutely amazing and you don't have to do anything with it. I also want to talk to you about the beauty of using less than perfect photos. I personally love using photos that aren't really, really sharp. This is actually a piece. Hopefully I'm going to be able to slot in a piece of the finished article, which I'm hoping to finish in a couple of days. But if you look on my Instagram or Facebook, you'll be able to see, this is lovely Robbie. You'll be able to see the work in progress coming through from this. This was a very, very, very old photo, 50 or 60 years old, that I had to scan in and then work from. And actually, I really like using these old photos. One, because I can just concentrate on values. I can concentrate on light and dark. This particular photo has got really great values. You've got those lovely shiny bits and you've got the really dark areas. So even if you don't get any detail in at all, it's still going to look really dramatic because of those lights and darks. And two, I can't remember whether I said A now or one. So one, the values and not having to look at details, and two, because a portrait like this is going to be incredibly special for somebody. They don't have any other photographs. The subject, the lovely Robbie, is he's been gone a long time, and to create a portrait from quite a poor photo, but to bring him to life in a portrait, I think is the most amazing thing to do. But I love working from slightly fuzzy photos because it means I don't get bogged down with the details. And I think this is a really good lesson for all of us, actually. Details aren't the most important part. They really, really aren't. The most important part of a portrait, of a drawing, are your values, so your lights and your darks. And if we can kind of get that going around in our heads all of the time, our drawings are going to develop amazingly. And it's not because we've got every single tiny little detail in there. The human eye, when it looks at a subject, it doesn't look for all of the details. It recognises the lights and darks and the shaping that those lights and darks create. If you look at your dog, if you just turn around and look at your dog, when you look at the fur, or your cat, or whatever you've got sitting around in your house, I happen to have 3 very large dogs lying around in my house. But if I turn around and I look at Nellie lying on the floor here, when I look at her fur, I don't see individual bits of fur. I see light, I see dark, I see texture, and I see patterns. That's what I see. My brain then kind of fills in all of the bits that I don't necessarily see, and that's exactly the same when it comes to looking at a portrait. So don't feel you have to get every single tiny little detail in there. In fact, getting every single tiny little detail in is a bit of a distraction for our very busy brains. So the other side of poor quality photos isn't necessarily the actual lack of detail. As you can see with these 2 photos, the details aren't actually lacking, and there's some really nice details in here. The issue with these types of photos is the distortion that you've got on them. So you can see Vinny here. To be honest, he actually does look like this. It's not distorted at all. It's just a perfect photo of Vinny. If you get too close up with, a smartphone, well, any phone actually, but particularly a smartphone, we get used to kind of taking our animals with smartphones and everything. If you get too close up, what happens is the focal point changes and you get this sort of this distortion. So his nose is really lengthened. It's far longer than what it actually is, and it enlarges, so he's got this enormous nose, this big sort of long face, his little eyes peeking out there. Sometimes this works really nicely if you're working with the dog looking up, and it's it actually looks quite attractive. With Vinny, it's not a good look on Vinny at all because he's got quite a long nose anyway, and this has just enhanced it. So you would not use a photo like this, and if you get sent a photo like this, it is a good idea to refuse it purely because it's going to look very odd in a portrait. The other example I've got here is this lovely horse. Again, do you know, the colours are beautiful, absolutely gorgeous colours. There's enough detail in here to make a fabulous portrait. But you take this and you take it out of the, in fact, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do this. Let me just have a look. Oops. Let me just see if I can remove the background from him, and then we'll, there we go. There we go. So anybody who's wanted to get a background removed really quickly, Canva's really great for that. It totally changes the perspective of it. It looks okay in the photograph because you've got the background there, and it's definitely a photo. When you take the background away and you create a portrait from this, you have a very, very distorted horse. So you've got these huge ears. You've got sort of like narrow across the eyes, and then this big broad nose that comes down and lengthens. So this is far, far longer than what it is. And then what you've got is you've got this skinny little neck. We can't see much of it. And this skinny little behind here, because everything is just elongated. So you've got to be really, really careful when working with photos like this. More experienced artists, you will be able to redraw these freehand and then kind of use the details within the photo to help you with the colouring and markings and everything. You can use something like Photoshop to sort of, you know, move stuff around. If you only have this photograph to work with and you really wanted to take the commission on, my suggestion would be to redraw it. You can use elements, you can use the eyes, you can use the shaping of the ears, but redraw it so it's in proportion. And again, you know, if you're not quite as experienced an artist, you know, and you maybe struggle with kind of getting the proportions and everything correct and redrawing it, then this is another one that is like, no, can't do that. I know a lot of people do draw these ones with the great big long faces. I'm going to be completely honest here. I think they look horrible. I don't mean the drawing looks horrible. I mean just the proportions of the horse. They just look horrible. You know, and yes, I have done them in the past, and I really, really try hard now not to work with photos like that. I find these photos, these elongated, distorted photos, the worst ones to work with, rather than the ones with no detail. Because at least the ones with no detail, if they're in proportion, you can work with the values and you can make it look something like these ones. Just going to look horrible. So if we move on to the next thing. Okay, so so I usually don't say no to any portraits, okay? You know, usually I can work with the images. I know a lot of artists refuse point blank, you know, to draw from a poor image. And, you know, I completely respect that, and I can totally and utterly understand why they would do it. Part of the reason that I always accept photos, or usually accept photos, is because I'm not very good at saying no. But there are times when you have to say, I can't possibly work with this. And this is one of my own photos of Nelly. This fabulous photo. You can't create a photograph you can't create a portrait from this. I mean, you just can't. You can't see where her eyes are. Her nose is all, goodness knows what she was doing. Her nose is all swizzy. It's all, you know, there's no detail in there at all. This you could not, you know, use as a portrait photograph. And you might be sitting there thinking, oh gosh, Bonny, you know, aren't you funny putting in this really awful photo? You would not believe the photos that a portrait artist is sent to draw from. You would not believe. Well, any pet portrait artists who are watching this, you will believe. And you'll be going, yes, Bonny, absolutely. You know, you have, gosh, I was sent a picture of a dog sitting about, I don't know, 200 metres away in a wood. You know, it's just like this black blob. I've been sent photos of dogs where somebody's just turned around in the car and taken a picture of them sort of sat in the back, and you kind of get just like half of a face. I've been sent the top of an eye, a bit of a head, and then a bit of a muzzle, and can I kind of sort all of those out, you know, make a portrait from it. You would not believe the dreadful photos we get. So these photos, you really do have to say no, and it's okay to say no. The hardest part of saying no to a portrait or to a photograph is the actual making a decision to say no. That actually, little life tip there. The hardest part in life ever is making a decision. Once you've made the decision, it's plain sailing. Off you go, and you can make your plans and off you go. But, you know, that's the hardest part, is making that decision to say no. You can sit there umming and ahhing and worrying, but as soon as you go, no, not having this, then, you know, you feel empowered, and you can then tell your client, absolutely no, we're not doing this. If we go back to Robbie here, again, when you get out, and I wouldn't class this as a really poor photo, you know, perhaps when I was starting out and I couldn't see any of the details and everything, it would kind of scare me a little bit, but this I don't see as a really bad photo. But when I was talking about concentrating on the values, that's exactly what we need to do. We've got shapes in here, so we've got his bottom here, we've got shapes, we've got little lines and everything. Don't be tempted, though, to try and draw absolutely everything that you see on here, because what will happen is you will end up with a replica of the photo with the fuzzy lines. So this is where you can use your a little bit of sort of like that artistic license, that little bit of, you know, you just putting something else into a piece. And I think this is where, if you're very, very new to drawing and to art and animal portraits, this is probably where you're in this, Robbie then becomes this, and you have to say no. Because if you then try and copy absolutely everything from the photograph, you are going to get a replica of the photo when he's all been fuzzy. And I think, for me, working with poor photographs, I think has really aided my development. I think it's really helped me to progress anyway, because I've had to kind of think for myself. So, it could be that you take on photos that are sort of slightly less quality, slightly poorer quality, but still have some element of detail in. Robbie's quite a good example, although he is quite fuzzy, you know, so we need to kind of know where to sharpen him up a little bit, you know, and that's where a little bit more experience comes in, because you know, you kind of know, oh, I'll just sharpen this, or I'll just tweak that. So I hope that has been useful. There are definitely some free programs out there that you can use. I tend to use the Adobe products for my photo manipulation, and I tend to use my the editing tools on my phone. You know, if I need to do any quick tweaks or anything like that with colour. But usually I use Lightroom. I find Lightroom is a really, really fabulous piece of software to be able to do that. So don't worry about the less than perfect photos. Work with your values. Photos like this that are a little bit distorted, honestly, I'd say no.